The air in the corridor was always cold. Junsu pulled his jacket tighter as he walked. He was tired. His eyes felt dry from looking at his tablet screen for too long. For 2 days, he had been working double shifts. His job was not glamorous. He was a logistics and language helper for the exchange program. When the aliens, the Krikth, arrived, everyone wanted to be a diplomat or a scientist. Junsu just made sure the right food packets were in the right rooms and that the translation devices were charged. The world had changed when the sleek, silent ships descended. They did not come with war, but with a quiet request to talk. The Krikth looked like tall, slender crickets made of polished stone and dark glass. They spoke in beautiful, complicated chirps. Humanity, surprised and scared, agreed to a meeting place on Jeju Island. The program was built on rules. So many rules. Do not approach. Do not touch. Do not make sudden movements. Speak clearly. Junsu knew all the rules. He was sick of them. His final task for the night was a routine check of the shared space. It was a large dome with clear walls showing the night sky and the garden outside. It was meant for informal meetings, but they were always formal. Always watched by cameras. He pushed the door open. The light inside was soft, and he was not alone. One of them was there. A Krikth. She stood by the window, looking out at the Earth's moon. Junsu recognized her designation. Kalen. She was a liaison, a talker for her people. In the low light, her shell shimmered with hints of green and deep blue. She wore the standard sleek gray suit and a helmet with a dark visor. She turned her head slightly at the sound of the door. A soft chirp came from the device on her chest, and then a calm, digital voice spoke. You are the coordinator from the evening shift. You arranged the delivery of the silicate substrates to our residential wing. Junsu stopped, surprised she had noticed. He had just been doing his job. Yes, that was me. Junsu. A series of melodic clicks. The translator lagged for a second. This efficiency was appreciated. The substrates were correct. Thank you, Junsu. It was the first time one of them had ever thanked him personally. Not the organization. Him. He didn't know what to say. Oh, you're welcome. It's just my job. Kalen gave a slow, slight nod, a mannerism she must have learned from humans. She turned back to the window. The interaction seemed over. Junsu pulled out his tablet to do his check. A notification popped up on the screen. It was a program alert. Cultural query minor is now available. A reciprocal exchange of non-essential data or simple gesture may be initiated. Proceed. He almost dismissed it. He was too tired for this. But the silence in the room felt heavy. She had thanked him. The protocol was there for a reason, to build bridges. All he had to do was ask a small, polite question about art, or music, or a harmless custom. He looked at her back, her elegant, alien silhouette against the stars. The absurdity of it all hit him. Here he was, a man from Busan who used to fix boats, in a room with a creature from another world. The pressure, the rules, the sheer weirdness made his tired brain short-circuit. He meant to think a simple question, but his mouth, used to making jokes with his friend Myri to relieve tension, moved on its own. He let out a tired sigh and spoke to her back, his voice flat and joking. How about a kiss? For luck. The words hung in the air. They felt stupid and crude the moment he said them. He froze. His heart jumped into his throat. He had broken about 5 major rules. He imagined alarms, red lights, security guards rushing in to drag him away. He would lose his job. He would be famous as the idiot who ruined human-alien relations over a dumb joke. Kalen went perfectly still. She did not turn around. She did not call for security. The only sound was the faint hum of the air filters. Then, she slowly turned to face him. Her visor was dark, reflecting his own worried face back at him. Her translator device emitted a quiet, complex series of chirps and whirs, but no translated words came out. Junsu held up his hands. I am so sorry. That was a joke. A bad human joke. I did not mean it. Please ignore it. But Kalen was not looking at his hands. She seemed to be looking at his face through the visor. Then her own hands came up. They were long, with 3 delicate fingers. They went not to her translator, but to the base of her helmet. To the environmental seal. A cold dread washed over Junsu. No, wait, you don't have to do that. The atmosphere, it might not be safe for you. She ignored him. There was a soft, definitive hiss as the seal broke. The sound was louder than any alarm in Junsu's mind. With a gentle, deliberate motion, she lifted the helmet from her head. She held it in her hands. The air of the shared space, the human air, touched her for the first time. Junsu could only stare. Her head was elegant, shaped like a smooth stone. Her skin was a seamless, iridescent chitin. But it was her eyes he was drawn to. They were large, multifaceted, and deep. In the soft light, they seemed to have layers, like pools of dark water catching moonlight. They held an expression he could not name. It was not anger. It was not affection. It was something else, something deep and serious. She took a slow breath, testing the air. Her mouth parts moved slightly. Then her own voice, not the translator's, came out. It was a whispery, multi-toned sound, like wind over a hollow reed. At the same time, her translator finally spoke, matching her haunting tone word for word. "Look," it said softly. "At me." Junsu was already looking. He could not look away. All his tiredness, all his fear vanished. He was completely seen, and he was completely seeing. He had made a stupid joke to a being from the stars, and she had responded by removing her helmet. He had no idea what it meant. He only knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that nothing would ever be simple again. For a long moment, there was only silence. The hum of the air system seemed to grow louder. Junsu stood frozen, his mind empty of everything except the being in front of him. Kalen's eyes held his. They were not like human eyes. They were complex, absorbing the light. They did not blink. The sound of the door sliding open broke the spell. Footsteps, quick and sharp, clicked on the floor. It was Myri, Junsu's friend, the xenobiologist. She was carrying a datapad and looked stressed. "Junsu, the system log says you're in here for a final check, but your life sign monitor just spiked. Are you?" Her words died in her throat. She stopped a few steps into the room. Her eyes went wide. She saw Junsu pale and still. She saw Kalen. She saw the helmet held loosely in the alien's long, delicate hands. Myri's professional training took over, but her voice was tight with shock. "Liaison Kalen, your helmet. The atmospheric compatibility is still in Phase 1 testing. This is a severe protocol breach." She did not move closer, knowing not to startle either of them. Kalen slowly turned her head toward Myri. The movement was smooth. She acknowledged the human scientist with a slight tilt of her head. But then she turned back to Junsu. It was clear Myri's arrival was secondary. Her full attention remained on the man who had made the joke. "The atmosphere is acceptable," Kalen's translator said. Its tone still that soft, direct whisper. "For a short duration. The risk was calculated." "Why?" Myri asked, her voice a mix of professional concern and pure curiosity. "Why would you take that risk?" Kalen did not answer Myri. She took a small step closer to Junsu. He instinctively took a half step back, but then made himself stand still. He felt he owed her that after what he had started. "You made a request," Kalen stated. Her own mouth parts moved, producing quiet, harmonic sounds underneath the translated words. "A cultural query. Minor. You spoke a desire. I have acknowledged it." "It wasn't a real desire," Junsu said, his voice too loud in the quiet dome. He winced and tried to speak more softly. "It was a joke. It is something humans say sometimes without meaning it. It is a failure of words. I am sorry." Kalen's head tilted to the other side. It was a bird-like, questioning motion. "A joke. The concept is known. It is an intentional miscommunication to create social bonding through shared confusion." "Yes, that's one way to put it," Myri said carefully, still watching from a distance. "Then the shared confusion is achieved," Kalen said, her focus unbreaking from Junsu. "But the request was made. The form was spoken. My people take the spoken form seriously. To acknowledge a request is to give it weight, to show it respect. Junsu's mouth was dry. By removing your helmet? By presenting truth, Kalen replied. The helmet is a barrier. It is safety. It is also distance. To remove it in response to a request is to show the request is seen. Truly seen. Not through filters or translators or rules. It is to say, I am here. I am real. And I have heard you. She took another slow breath of the room's air. It was a conscious act. You asked for a kiss. Our translators struggled. The closest meaning in our culture is not a physical touching of mouthparts. It is a precursor. It is the quiet moment before a truth is shared. The closing of distance so a truth can pass. You asked me to close the distance. Junsu felt a heavy weight settle in his stomach. He had been flippant. He had been tired and stupid. And she had interpreted his carelessness as a brave, profound, and terrifying thing. So what happens now? He asked quietly. Now, Kalen said. You look, and I look. The truth is this, your request, however made, has been honored in the way my people understand. The transaction is complete. She did not move to put her helmet back on. She seemed to be waiting. Junsu realized she was waiting for him to complete his side, to truly look. He forced himself to study her face, not just see it as an alien thing, but to see her. The fine patterns on her chitin, the way the light played across its surface, the profound depth of her eyes. It was uncomfortable. It was intensely personal. It felt more intimate than any kiss he had ever had. After what felt like a minute, Kalen gave a single, slow nod. She raised her hands and, with that same deliberate care, placed the helmet back over her head. The seal hissed as it re-engaged. The dark visor hid her eyes once more. The moment was over. She turned to include Myri in her gaze. Protocolist Myri, you may report the breach. The reasoning is logged in my personal translator's memory. It will be shared with the Oversight Council. Then she looked back at Junsu one last time. Coordinator Junsu, your joke carried a meaning you did not intend. That is the risk of communication. But do not regret it. Created a clear moment. That is rare. Without another word, she walked past them, her steps silent on the floor. The door slid open and closed behind her. Junsu let out a shuddering breath, his shoulders slumping. He felt utterly drained. Myri rushed over to him. Are you okay? What in the world did you do? I think, Junsu said, his voice hollow. I accidentally asked her for something very, very serious. On the floor where Kalen had stood, a small indicator light on his tablet blinked. The cultural query, minor notification, was still on the screen. Its status had updated. IT now read, query acknowledged, and fulfilled. The world came back in a rush of sound. The hum of the air system, the distant chirp of a cricket in the garden outside the dome, the pounding of his own heart in his ears. Junsu stared at the closed door where Kalen had exited. He felt like he had been standing still for an hour. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking. Myri was the first to move. She walked quickly to a panel on the wall. She pressed her hand against it. This is Protocolist Myri. I am reporting a Category 2 protocol breach in the shared space. Liaison Kalen voluntarily removed her personal environmental helmet. The human coordinator is unharmed. The liaison has returned to the secure wing, requesting a full review of atmospheric data from this sector for the last 10 minutes. A calm, disembodied voice responded. Acknowledged, Protocolist. The review team is alerted. Please remain in the shared space for debriefing. Myri let out a slow breath and turned to Junsu. Her face was all professional concern, but her eyes were wide with a mix of alarm and fascination. Okay, start from the beginning. What did you say to her? Junsu walked stiffly to a bench built into the wall and sat down. He felt heavy. I didn't mean to say anything. I was checking my tablet. The cultural query thing popped up. I was tired. She thanked me for the silicate substrates. It was nice. And then my brain just stopped working. I looked at her and said, how about a kiss? For luck. He said the words to the floor. his face burning with shame. Myri was silent for a moment. Then, to his surprise, she let out a small, choked sound. It was almost a laugh. You did not. I did. To a quick-th liaison. You asked her for a kiss. It was a joke. A bad, stupid human joke. He finally looked up at her. You know me. When I'm stressed or tired, I say the dumbest thing I can think of to break the tension. I didn't think for 1 second she would hear it as a real request. Myri sat down next to him, her scientific mind already turning over the information. But she did. And not just as any request. She processed it through her own cultural framework. She said the translation was close to a precursor to sharing truth. Myri pulled out her own datapad and started typing notes. That's huge, Junsu. That's a massive piece of xenocultural data. Their concept of intimacy is tied to truth-telling, not physicality. I don't care about the data, Junsu said, his voice rough. I made her break a major safety rule. She took off her helmet, Myri, in our air, because of my dumb mouth. She said she calculated the risk, Myri replied, still typing. Their biology is tougher than it looks. A few minutes was probably fine. But that's not the point. The point is she felt the request was significant enough to justify the breach. She felt it required an act of radical sincerity. The door slid open again. 2 people from the security and diplomacy team entered. They were not wearing guard uniforms, but neat suits. Their faces were calm but serious. Junsu knew them. They were the quiet ones who handled problems before they became incidents. Coordinator Junsu, protocolist Myri. The woman, Sumin, said, We need to go over the sensor logs and your statements. Let's move to a debriefing room. The next hour passed in a blur for Junsu. They sat in a small, plain room. Sumin asked simple, direct questions. Junsu told them everything, exactly as it happened. He did not try to make himself look better. He told them about his tiredness, his stupid joke. They played back the audio from the room sensors. Hearing his own voice say the words made him cringe. They watched the video from the ceiling camera. Seeing it from above was strange. He saw himself, a small figure, speaking. He saw Kaylin's stillness. They watched her slow, deliberate removal of the helmet. There was no hesitation in her movements. She was very certain. The other agent, Dongwook, observed quietly. Sumin paused the video on the moment Kaylin's face was fully revealed, looking at Junsu. Coordinator, in your opinion, was there any sign of threat or hostility in her actions? Junsu thought of those deep, layered eyes, the profound attention.
No.
None. It was the opposite of hostile. It was intense. It felt more serious than anything I've ever been part of. They asked Myri her observations. She gave her professional analysis of the biological risk and echoed Junsu's feeling about the cultural weight of the act. Finally, Sumin nodded and closed her file. All right, Coordinator Junsu, you are suspended from all direct contact duties with the quick-th, effective immediately. You will continue your logistical work from the administrative block. You are not to attempt to communicate with Liaison Kaylin. This is for your safety and the integrity of the program while we review. Do you understand? Junsu nodded. He had expected nothing less. I understand. We will be interviewing Liaison Kaylin separately. Her translator's memory log will be reviewed. Sumin stood up. You are both free to go. Please do not discuss the details of this incident with anyone outside the review team. Junsu and Myri walked out into the main corridor. It was late. The hall was empty and quiet. I'm sorry, Junsu, Myri said softly. I know you didn't mean for this to happen. What did I do, Myri? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I just wanted to do my job and go home. Now I've messed everything up. I'll probably be sent back to the mainland. I don't think so, Myri said, thinking. She fulfilled the query. She closed the loop. In her mind, it settled. The problem is in our human rules, not in the exchange itself. Get some sleep. We'll figure it out tomorrow. Junsu went back to his small room. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He kept seeing her face, not as an alien thing but as a face. A person who had looked at him and seen a request for truth where there was only a joke. He felt a strange, aching guilt. He had asked for something profound without knowing its value, and she had paid the price. He had traded her sincerity for his stupidity. He closed his eyes, but sleep would not come. All he could hear was the whisper of her translator in the silent dome. Look. Me. The next 2 days passed with a strange quiet. Junsu was moved to a desk in the administrative block. His new room had no window to the gardens or the shared spaces. It was a small office with a screen showing lists of supply inventories and maintenance schedules. His world became numbers and requests for cleaning bots and nutrient paste flavors. He was a ghost in the machine of the program. He saw other coordinators hurry past his open door, talking in low voices about their direct interactions with the CRIC-TH. He heard the excitement in their tones. He felt a dull ache. He had thrown his chance away with a careless sentence. Myri visited him during her breaks. She brought him reports that were not secret, just to keep him connected. The review is ongoing, she told him on the second day, sipping a coffee. They've interviewed Kaylin twice. Her story is exactly the same as yours. She takes full responsibility. She says the act was a correct cultural response. Does anyone believe that? Junsu asked, staring at a list of linen deliveries. The cultural analysts are fascinated, Myri said. They're pulling apart the translator's logs. The word kiss doesn't exist in the CRIC-TH language database. It had to find the closest conceptual match. It chose a phrase that roughly means, the breath before the truth. Junsu put his head in his hands. So I didn't ask for something romantic. I asked for something solemn. Exactly. To her, you initiated a tiny personal truth ceremony. By removing her helmet, she participated. She met your request with her own truth, her real face. Myri leaned forward. Don't you see? In a way, it's beautiful. And it proves their communication is incredibly nuanced. They value intent behind words almost more than the words themselves. It doesn't feel beautiful, Junsu muttered. It feels like I tricked her. You didn't. Your intent was confusion. Her interpretation was sincerity. Both are true at the same time. That's first contact, Junsu. It's messy. Later that afternoon, Junsu needed to stretch his legs. He was allowed to walk in the eastern glass corridor that looked out over the interior botanical gardens. It was a path for humans only, a place to see plants without disturbing the CRIC-TH, who sometimes visited the outer gardens. He walked slowly, his hands in his pockets. He looked at the earth plants, so green and familiar. Then he looked further, through another layer of glass to the outer garden designed with strange, crystalline structures and low, humming plants the CRIC-TH had brought. A figure was there. His breath caught. It was Kaylin. She was moving slowly between the alien plants, her helmet on, her movements graceful and precise. She was alone. She stopped. She seemed to be looking at something in her hand, a small, shimmering stone. Then, as if sensing a presence, she turned her head. She looked directly through the 2 layers of glass. Right at him, Junsu froze. He knew the rules. He was not to communicate. He should turn and walk away. But his feet felt rooted to the spot. After a moment, Kaylin gave a single, slow nod of her head. It was the same gesture she had used in the dome. An acknowledgement. Then she did something unexpected. She raised her empty hand. Not in a wave, but with her fingers held together. She tilted her hand from side to side slowly. The light caught her gray glove. It was a simple, silent motion. Junsu had no idea what it meant. A greeting? A question? He just stared. Kaylin repeated the motion, slower. Then she pointed one long finger at him. She pointed at her own eyes. Then she pointed out at the garden, tracing a path in the air. Look. See. She was trying to show him something. Not with words, but with gesture. He followed where she had pointed. He saw a large, purple-leafed plant with a pulsating glow at its center. He had never noticed it before. He looked back at her and nodded, to show he understood. She tilted her head. Then she pointed to him, to her own mouth, and made a small opening and closing motion with her fingers. You speak. Junsu shook his head sadly. He pointed to his own mouth, then made a cutting motion across his throat. He then pointed back toward the administrative block and mimed typing on a screen. I cannot speak. I am confined to desk work. Kaylin stood very still for a moment. She seemed to process this. Then, she nodded once, sharply. She placed the hand with the shimmering stone against the clear barrier between the outer garden and the inner corridor for a brief moment. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing behind a large, spiraling crystal. Junsu stood there for a long time, his forehead almost touching the cool glass. The encounter had lasted less than a minute. No words were spoken, no rules were broken, but it was communication. It was a thread, thin and fragile. Connecting his silence to her solitude, he returned to his desk. The inventory lists seemed even more meaningless now. He found a blank piece of paper. He wasn't an artist, but he picked up a pen. He drew a simple, clumsy sketch of the plant he had seen. The one with the purple leaves and the glowing center. He tried to capture its shape. Under it, he wrote, "I saw it." He didn't know why he did it. He folded the paper and put it in his pocket. The next day, he went back to the eastern corridor at the same time. He did not see her at first. His heart sank. Then, movement. She was there in almost the same spot. She saw him. This time, Junsu acted first. He took the folded paper from his pocket. He held it up against the glass. He pointed to the drawing, then pointed out to the garden where the real plant was. Kaylin stepped closer to her side of the barrier. She studied the drawing. She looked from the paper to the plant and back to his face. Her translator emitted a soft, short chirp. Positive sound, he hoped. Then, she raised her hand again. She held up one finger. Wait. She moved over to the glowing plant. With careful fingers, she did not pick it, but she picked up a single fallen leaf from the soil beneath it. She returned to the glass. She held the purple leaf up, matching it to his drawing. Then she placed it gently on the ground on her side of the barrier, pressing it flat against the glass so he could see its true color and veins. A gift. A confirmation. Junsu smiled for the first time in days. It was a small, tired smile, but it was real. He nodded vigorously and gave her a thumbs up, a human gesture he hoped she understood. She tilted her head, observing his thumb. Then, she carefully raised her own hand and mimicked the gesture. Her 3 fingers coming together to approximate it was clumsy. It was imperfect. It was a new conversation, and it had just begun. The silent conversations became a routine. Every afternoon, Junsu would finish his inventory work and walk to the eastern corridor. Most days, Kaylin would be in the outer garden. If she wasn't there, he would wait for a few minutes before leaving, a small disappointment in his chest. They never spoke. The glass barrier was thick and the rules were clear, but they built a language of their own. Junsu brought more drawings. He drew a cup of coffee. He drew his desk. He drew the moon he had seen in the dome that first night. Each time, he would hold the paper to the glass. Kaylin would study it. She would then find something in her world to show him in return. For the coffee cup, she brought a smooth, heated stone she held in a similar way. For the moon, she pointed to a softly glowing orb that floated in a solution in their lab. A crick-th light source point. One day, he drew a simple human face with a smile. He held it up. Kaylin looked at it for a long time. She pointed to the smile, then pointed to Junsu's own face. Her head tilted in question. He nodded and smiled for real, showing his teeth. Kaylin took a step back. She brought her own hands to her helmet, near where her mouth would be. She moved her fingers in a small, fluttering motion. It was not a smile. It was something else, a sign of her own. He understood she was showing him her equivalent. He nodded again to show he accepted it. He learned her signs. A slow sweep of the hand meant "I understand." Tapping 2 fingers together meant wait. A flat hand held up, palm out, meant stop or enough. He taught her his. A thumbs up, a wave, a shrug for "I don't know." It was peaceful. It was simple. For those few minutes each day, Junsu didn't feel like a suspended failure. He felt like an explorer. Myri noticed the change in him. "You seem less miserable," she said over lunch in the cafeteria. "I've been walking in the eastern corridor. It's nice. Good light," he said, avoiding her eyes. Myri was smart. She said nothing, but a small smile played on her lips. She knew. The peace could not last forever. On the 5th day of his suspension, Junsu was called back to the same debriefing room. Sumin and Dongwook were there, their faces unreadable. "Coordinator Junsu," Sumin began. "The review is complete. The Oversight Council has reached a decision regarding your actions and the incident with Liaison Kalen." Junsu's stomach tightened. This was it. He was going to be sent home. "Liaison Kalen's testimony was consistent and compelling," Dongwook said. "Her cultural explanation checks out with our evolving models of Krikth society. They place a high value on completed exchanges and truthful presentation." Sumin took over. "You acted carelessly, Junsu. You used a protocol for a joke. That cannot happen again. However, the outcome, while a safety breach, has been classified as a net positive for cultural understanding." Junsu blinked. "A positive?" "Yes." It revealed a deep, nonverbal layer of their communication. It showed they can and will adapt their profound cultural practices to interpret our clumsy attempts at contact. "Your punishment stands. You are permanently reassigned from direct liaison duties. However, you are reinstated to full logistical status. And," Sumin paused, "Liaison Kalen has made a formal request." "What request?" "She has asked for you to be assigned as a secondary consultant on a new project. She specified you by name." Junsu was stunned. "Why? After what I did?" "Because of what you did," Dongwook corrected gently. "She believes the misaligned exchange created a unique foundation. She wants to help develop a new protocol. One for navigating human figurative language and humor. She thinks you are, in her words, a suitable case study." Junsu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had gone from a logistics guy to a protocol breaker to a case study. "What do I have to do?" he asked. "You will meet with her, in a supervised setting, with protocolist Myri present. You will talk. You will explain your jokes. She will explain her interpretations. You will help build a guide so the next human who makes a stupid joke doesn't accidentally propose marriage or declare war." Sumin almost smiled. "Do you accept?" Junsu thought of the quiet afternoons at the glass, the drawings, the purple leaf. He thought of her eyes, asking him to look. He had started this. He owed it to her, and to everyone who came after, to try and finish it properly. "Yes," he said. "I accept." The meeting was set for the next morning. It was not in the shared space, but in a small, neutral meeting room with a table and 3 chairs. Myri was already there, setting up a recorder. Junsu sat down, his palms sweating. The door opened. Kalen entered. She wore her usual suit and helmet. She moved to the chair opposite Junsu and sat. She placed her hands flat on the table. She looked at Myri, then at Junsu. "Greetings, protocolist Myri." "Coordinator Junsu," her translator said. "It's tone neutral." "Hello, Liaison Kalen," Myri said formally. "Thank you for this." Junsu just nodded. Unable to find words, Kalen's visor was fixed on him. "I have requested your presence, Junsu, because our exchange is unfinished." "I thought the helmet removal finished it," Junsu said quietly. "Completed the truth cycle." "It did not complete the understanding," she stated. "You spoke a form you did not mean. I responded with a form I did mean. We have a discrepancy. This discrepancy is a problem waiting to happen for others. We will now dissect it. We will find where the words broke. We will build a bridge at the break." She spoke about communication like it was engineering, like a broken pipe needed fixing. "Okay," Junsu said, taking a deep breath. "Where do we start?" "Start with the joke," Kalen said, her head tilting. "Explain its purpose. Not the words. The purpose in your chest." Junsu looked at Myri, who gave him an encouraging nod. He looked back at the dark visor. He began to talk. He told her about being tired, about the pressure, about how humans use silly words to make the heavy things feel lighter. He explained that his request was never a request at all. It was a release of tension, a deflation. Kaylin listened. She did not move. When he finished, she was silent for a full minute. The purpose was to decrease inner pressure by using an illogical form. Yes, Junsu said, a form that, in my culture, is reserved for increasing inner clarity before a heavy truth. Kaylin's translator made a soft, clicking sound. The same action, opposite purposes. This is the core of the problem. Junsu felt a wave of relief. She understood. She really understood. Now, Kaylin said, her voice changing, becoming slightly softer. I have a question for my case study. What is it? The drawings. In the corridor. What was their purpose? Junsu felt his face grow warm. He hadn't known she would ask about that. Myri looked at him, curious. I wanted to talk to you, he said, his voice low. But I couldn't. So I found another way. Their purpose was connection. A different kind. Kaylin nodded slowly. Their purpose was clear. The form was new. There was no discrepancy. That, she said, tapping a long finger on the table, is where we will begin building our bridge. The work began. 3 times a week, Junsu, Myri, and Kaylin met in the small room. It was not like the silent garden talks. It was structured and slow. But it was real. They started with simple human phrases. Junsu would say something common. Something like, break a leg before a task, or, it's raining cats and dogs. Kaylin would listen. Her translator would process the words. Then she would explain what her people's language systems thought it meant. The results were often strange and funny. Break a leg. Kaylin repeated one session. The translator suggests a literal wish for bodily harm to improve performance. This is confusing. Is it a threat? No. Junsu said, laughing. He couldn't help it. It means good luck. It's an old theater saying. You say the opposite of what you mean to trick fate, maybe. Kaylin was silent. You use reversed meanings to invoke positive outcomes. This is complex. We do not have this. A wish for good fortune is stated clearly, with specific harmonics for the type of fortune. Myri typed notes furiously. So for your people, ambiguity in a well-wish is disrespectful? Like you can't be bothered to be precise with your hope for them. Correct, Kaylin said. Precision is care. Junsu thought about that. He thought about all the lazy, joking things he said to his friends. He wondered if he seemed careless. Next, they worked on humor. This was harder. Junsu tried to explain a simple joke. Why did the chicken cross the road? To get to the other side. Kaylin listened. This is a question of motive. The answer is literal. It states an obvious action. Where is the miscommunication that creates the social bonding? Myri jumped in. The humor is in the anticlimax. The listener expects a clever or silly reason. The truth is boring. The shared moment is in realizing you were set up for a surprise that never comes. Kaylin tilted her head. The bonding is in shared disappointment? In shared recognition of a pattern being broken. Myri clarified. I see. Kaylin was quiet again. Our bonding humor is different. It is in shared recognition of a pattern being perfectly, unexpectedly completed. A harmonic resolution that seems impossible but arrives. They were building their bridge plank by strange plank. Junsu learned that Krikth did not use names as humans did. They used a combination of a core frequency and a title based on skill. Kaylin was not her name, but a human attempt to pronounce the title First Listener for Outer Harmonies. You don't have a personal name? Junsu asked one day. We are our function and our song. A personal name, as you mean it, a separate label, suggests a self apart from purpose. We do not have this concept. She paused. Your Junsu is such a label. It is a sound with no meaning in itself. This is interesting. It is free. The meetings were not all about work. Sometimes, after the official notes were done, they talked. Myri asked about CRIC-TH biology. Kalen asked about human families. Junsu mostly listened, watching the way Kalen moved her hands when she explained things. One afternoon, Myri was called away for an emergency. A problem with the atmospheric filters in the CRIC-TH wing. She hurried out, leaving Junsu and Kalen alone for the first time since the dome. The room felt very quiet. Junsu busied himself with putting his notes away. Junsu, Kalen's translator said. It's volume lower. He looked up. Yes. The work is progressing. The bridge will be useful.
I'm glad.
I really am sorry, for how it started. The start is irrelevant. It is the direction that matters. She shifted in her chair. A rare, unplanned movement. Your drawings have stopped. He was surprised she mentioned it. I thought we were communicating properly now. With words. Words are tools for the bridge. The drawings were a different tool. A tool for a different purpose. Her visor was fixed on him. You said their purpose was connection. He swallowed. Yes. That purpose is also important. It should not be abandoned for the sake of efficiency. He didn't know what to say. He felt a warmth spread through his chest. Would you like me to draw something again? Yes. What should I draw? Draw something true, she said simply. Not a joke. Not a lesson. Something true from your world. That night in his room, Junsu thought hard. He rejected big ideas, the earth, the stars. They were not his truth. He thought about his life before. He thought of the docks in Busan. The smell of salt and fish. The sound of the boats creaking. The feeling of a repaired engine finally turning over. He took a clean sheet of paper. He wasn't a good artist, but he tried. He drew the rough shape of a fishing boat. He drew the water with simple lines. He drew a small figure on the dock, looking out. He didn't draw a face. It was just a person alone with the sea. The next day they had no formal meeting. He went to the eastern corridor in the afternoon. She was there. He held the drawing to the glass. Kalen stepped close. She looked at the boat, the water, the lonely figure. She looked for a long time. Then she did something new. She raised her hands. She placed them flat against the glass, on her side, opposite the paper. She held them there. It was not a sign they had made. It was not a CRIC-TH sign he knew. It just was. Presence. After a moment, she lowered her hands. She turned and walked to a nearby crystalline plant. She broke off a tiny, perfect shard, no bigger than a fingernail. It sparkled with internal light. She came back and placed it carefully on the ground against the glass, directly below his drawing. An exchange. A truth for a truth. He pressed his own hand against the glass where hers had been. The surface was cool. When he left, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. The bridge they were building in the meeting room was for everyone. But this, the drawings, the silent gifts, this was for them. It was a small, quiet path running parallel to the big bridge. Felt more important. The official document was titled Protocol Annex 7C, Navigating Figurative Language and Intentional Ambiguity in Human CRIC-TH Exchange. It was 30 pages long. Junsu's name was in the acknowledgments section. So was Kalen's translated title. Myri was listed as the primary author. Junsu held a printed copy. It felt light in his hands, but the weight of the work was heavy. He flipped through it. There were sections on humor, expectation versus anticlimax, well wishes and cultural reversal, and the risks of sarcasm. His stupid joke was now a case study in a blue box on page 14. He read it. It was strange to see his moment of carelessness explained so calmly, so clearly. The project was over. The bridge was built, at least on paper. He wasn't sure what happened now. He still had his logistics job. Kalen would go back to her high-level liaison work. Their meetings stopped. 2 days after the protocol was published. Junsu was in the supply office. He was checking a shipment order for nutrient paste flavor number 12, mild oceanic, when his tablet chimed. It was a direct message, not a system alert. The sender code was one he had come to know well. It was Kalen. The message was simple. Shared space.
Dome.
1 hour. If you are willing. He stared at it. Willing. It was a request, not an order. He typed back, his fingers clumsy. I will be there. An hour later, he stood outside the door to the observation dome. His heart was beating fast. It felt like the first time all over again. But different. He knew what was on the other side now. He knew her. He took a breath and went in. The dome was empty. The soft light was the same. The view of the sky was the same. He walked to the center, near where he had stood that night. The door hissed open behind him. He turned. Kaelin entered. She was not alone. Another Crichtich was with her, slightly taller, with a pattern of silver lines on their carapace. They stood by the door. Kaelin walked forward to meet Junsu. She stopped a polite distance away. Coordinator Junsu. Her translator said, "It's tone formal." Liaison Kaelin, he replied, matching her formality. This is second listener. They are here to observe a completed cycle. For the record. Junsu nodded to the other alien, who gave a slow, respectful nod back. Kaelin continued. The protocol is finished. The bridge is shared. Our work as case study and consultant is concluded. This is correct. It is, Junsu said. A feeling of loss, sharp and sudden, hit him. He had known this was coming, but hearing it was different. However, she said, and the tone of her translator shifted. It became softer, more like the voice in the dome that first night. Our exchange began here. It began with a request and an acknowledgement. It began with a removal of a barrier. She paused. Her hands came up, not to her helmet, but to a small pouch on her belt. She opened it. She pulled out 2 objects. One was the small, glittering crystal shard she had given him in the garden. The other was a folded piece of paper. She opened it carefully. It was his drawing of the fishing boat. I have kept these, she said. They are true things. They are not part of the bridge for everyone. They are the path for us. Junsu felt a tightness in his throat. He could only nod. The cycle must complete fully, Kaelin said. She looked at the second listener, then back at Junsu. You once asked for a kiss. You meant a joke. I gave you a truth. You have since given me many truths. In drawings, in words, in patience. The imbalance is corrected. She took a step closer. But the original form remains. A human request. A Crichtich understanding of that request. I would like to fulfill the original form, as I now understand it, not as a joke, not as a heavy truth, but as a sign that the path remains open. Is this acceptable? Junsu understood. She wasn't going to kiss him. That was never what it was about. She was going to complete the circle with full understanding on both sides. It is acceptable, he whispered. Kaelin nodded. She raised her hands again, this time to the seal of her helmet. There was the same soft hiss. She removed it just as she had before. She held it in the crook of her arm. Her true face was before him again, those deep, layered eyes catching the light. But this time, there was no shock, no fear. He saw her. He saw the fine details. He saw the intelligence and the quiet care. And she saw him. She did not move closer. Instead, she raised her free hand. She brought her long fingers to the area near her mouthparts. She made that same delicate, fluttering motion she had shown him through the glass. Her sign? Then, she extended that hand towards him, palm up, in a universal gesture of offering. Junsu smiled. It was a true smile, not of humor, but of recognition. He raised his own hand. He gave her a thumbs up, their first shared sign. Then he placed his hand over his heart and gave a small, slow bow of his head, a human sign of respect and thanks. Kaelin watched. She then mirrored his action. She placed her own hand over the smooth chitin of her chest. She bowed her head, lower and slower than his. The circle was complete. The request, the joke, the confusion, the truth, the work, the friendship. All of it was acknowledged. Kaelin placed her helmet back on. The moment passed from the personal back to the professional. But something had settled. Something was calm. The path remains, she stated, her translator's voice normal again. It does, he agreed. She turned and walked back to the second listener. They exchanged a series of soft, musical chirps. Then they both left the dome. Jansu was alone. He looked out at the sky. He felt no regret. No anxiety. He felt finished and also just begun. He reached into his own pocket. He pulled out the small, sparkling crystal shard. He had brought it with him, hoping but not knowing why. He held it in his palm, letting the dome light catch it. Outside, in the gardens of Earth, a real cricket began to chirp. It was a simple, rhythmic sound. It was not a translation. It was not a protocol. It was just a true thing singing in the night. Jansu listened, and for the first time he heard it not as an insect but as a song. He smiled, put the crystal back in his pocket, and went back to work.